Payday 2 is a game I wish I had played sooner, but I'm an incredibly adamant person about my opinions, even when they were from a shitty 15-year-old me who played the first game, hated it, and pretty much refused to touch Payday 2 on principle. What principles were those? I don't know. Frankly, I hate me. I keep listening to myself when I'm always wrong, because Payday 2 is sick. It's a first-person shooter reminiscent of Left 4 Dead with a very strong focus on its levels more than anything, though it's not the only thing this game excels at. Every level is some sort of heist or build up to a heist, so the devs were given a pretty huge canvas to do whatever with. One mission, you track down a drug cartel to some back cabin that you clear out, take over so you can make meth while endlessly fighting police and try not to explode the meth lab. Another has you tracking down a Russian drug lord by finding out his base of operations, killing everyone, trashing the place so he taunts you over the phone, allowing the mastermind of your group, Bane, to track his signal to a general location, while you also go underground to his hideout and use his smuggled goods to find his exact address. These missions really go all over the place and don't just revolve you around stealing cash and drugs. As the story progressed, it got weirder and more chaotic to the point where you start invading private military facilities built inside a mesa in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, or even robbing the White House itself for presidential pardons. The story in this game genuinely goes insane while managing to be the cheesiest shit ever. I fully expect that if this story were to continue, someone would get killed and you guys would be heisting the different levels of hell from Dante's Inferno to steal a soul back. And these are all backed by an incredible soundtrack done mostly by Simon Viklund. There's a really good mix of primarily techno music with occasional rock thrown in there. There's even a few tracks that include lyrics, like a track made to pay homage to Push It to the Limit, since it also came with a Scarface character pack. This soundtrack speaks to me on so many levels. Sadly, the objectives have a little less variety. They're mostly just an excuse to include set pieces, carry you through the level, and just delay you. It's mostly how well they integrate the basic objectives into the maps that really sell them. Like, when I say there isn't too much objective variety, I mean it. Get ready to see a lot of... I swear, there's so many countdown timers in this game, I'm fully expecting one day to walk up to this drill and it'll say, "Would you like to watch an ad to skip this drill?" It's either that or ferrying loot. I feel a weird satisfaction with high loot count missions because watching these four goofballs fumble around tossing bags to each other like a human conveyor belt is just so funny to watch. And you have to do all of this while facing near endless hordes of police. I feel like most of the time spent in missions is just because I got so distracted wading through floods of cops that I forgot to advance the mission objectives. This game basically ignored the nuance between hordes and quiet phases that Left 4 Dead and other inspired games had, because while I could sit here and talk about the complex mechanics that go into how long the cooldown and quiet phases are, like how many hostages you have, how much damage you've taken, objectives completed, and all that, none of that matters because they last like 30 seconds at most, and many missions are straight up endless no matter what you do anyways. Not that I'm really complaining, the endless sea of SWAT constantly oppressing you is such a good time. That's not the only way to play this game. Stealth is in fact an option. Now, it's not like Skyrim or Dishonored stealth, where you just sneak along the shadows and slowly murder everyone. It's actually quite complicated and extremely hard. Stealth in Payday 2 might be one of the hardest things I've had to do in a game because of how much time it requires while also allowing absolutely no mistakes. Stealth works like this. Your movement state dictates how far enemies can see you. Standing up and sprinting players can be seen further than crouching players. As a result, there's a lot of fun jank like being able to sprint, jump, crouch, and you can hop around at high speeds past people as they barely raise any suspicion. Noise pretty much has no play in this at all. They either get alerted with an explosion going off, unsilenced weapons, or windows shatter. The major factor in how fast you detect is your detection risk. Whatever this value is, it's the lowest suspicion you start out with. At max detection risk, you'll start out with 75% suspicion already, so it's extremely hard to avoid being seen. Turns out, wearing a bulletproof bodysuit, carrying a minigun and RPG in your pants makes you pretty fucking sus. And that's just for the player being detected. You might think, well, I'll just kill everything since the detection range is so low and they can't hear shit. Unfortunately, no. This used to be a legitimate strategy where people would use shotguns to launch corpses out of bounds, but now they have a really interesting, if severely limiting mechanic. Pagers. If you kill or subdue a cop, a pager instantly goes off. You have like 15 seconds to answer it, or else the alarm will automatically trigger, and to answer it, you have to sit there for about 15 seconds or so. The biggest kicker is you cannot stop this, or else the alarm will go off. You essentially have to avoid killing cops at all costs, because you never know when another NPC will walk in on you. Oh, and you also only have up to 4 pages per mission. If you kill a 5th cop, you instantly trigger the alarms. So, as you would expect, most missions have way more than 4 cops. Also, when you do kill someone, you can't move their body unless you put them in a body bag, and you only start off with 2, and with all the perks and equipment, you can only carry a max of 8. So not only can you only kill 4 cops, but you can only safely kill 8 NPCs period, or else you just have to leave the bodies all over the place for people to detect. Thankfully, there's a funny bit of jank in this system. NPCs only check if the head is visible. You can literally have a dead body on the floor in the middle of an open crowd if you somehow manage to glitch their face into the floor wall, which is entirely possible. There is one last way to try and recover from mistakes, and that's to subdue citizens. Unlike police, civilians generally won't react to you at first. They'll panic and freeze in place, you know, like how you'd expect to react if you saw an angry Japanese man holding a silenced shotgun revolver at you while screaming. If you hit the interact button from afar, you'll tell them to get down. It'll take a few tries, but they'll eventually get on the floor and act as a hostage. Downside is, unlike a corpse, if you leave them long enough, they'll eventually try to make a break for it and call the cops. If you use hand ties, you can stop this, as well as move them around, but you only have so few. So yeah, you practically have no room for error in some missions, because there's always more than 4 cops, and some missions are also flooded with civilians. Because of how long these missions can go on for, any body or tied up NPC is just asking to eventually be seen by someone somehow. Which is a shame because the stealth is genuinely fun. Many missions actually play very differently when the alarms aren't raised, so you get to experience things a bit differently. That said, many missions also still have timers, so you get these weird moments where you're just waiting for something to finish, but there's literally nothing you can do and no one will even catch you depending on the form of the timer. Most missions come in loud only, or can have both loud and stealth, but there are a few stealth only missions which are pretty ball busting, but quite fun. One simple example of a fun mission that plays differently in both loud and stealth is a mission called Big Bank. Here you have a simple bank heist, but this bank is special because it's got a reputation for being historically important and also has been never breached, so it's a lot of build up to cracking this safe. In stealth, you begin by scouting the place, searching for loose keycards and seeing where the cameras are, and then you go find and keep track of the bank manager. Then, once you locate the server room, you put on your disguise to break into this room. You could use a drill and wait like 2 minutes, use a keycard, or use an ECM jammer if you have the right skills for it. Once you're in, you have to ping a computer and access the right one. In multiplayer, you could have one person constantly ping the computer while you have the second person try and see which one it is, but sadly you can't in solo, so it's kind of trial and error. Once you got the code, you go to the vault access door and start the time lock to wait 3 minutes. This might put you in a false sense of security, since you'll end up getting a phone call from the security company about an unscheduled activation from the manager's office. So you pick up the phone and Bane pretends to be the manager. With that taken care of, you proceed with the spare keycards you got off the managers to shut off the lasers. Once you're in, you can try and take out these cops to make your life a bit easier and use their thumbs to activate the thumbprint scanner, which requires you to activate 2 buttons across the room and then retrieve the vault code from the manager's computer. Then you can finally access the vault. Once that's done, you grab all you can, pry open an elevator door and dump all your shit down there and get out. It's a pretty sweet feeling of being a sneaky fuck bank heist man. Problem is, it straight up took me like 5 hours to practice this heist, and I still ended up messing up towards the end. Thankfully, I basically had everything set up so the vault wasn't going to lock me out and force me to go to plan B, which is what would have happened if I got found out earlier, but it still kinda sucked. Now, for the loud heist on the other hand. You run in, guns blazing, forcing all the civilians onto the floor. You still need to find the server room and ping the computers, but this time you could just blow off the door with C4 or use a saw to cut it. Keycards still work if you found one though. Then, after you find the PC, you gotta rewire the time lock since it was disabled due to the alarm. So you climb to the roof of this bank to open this shed that has a wire box. Again, cards, saws, and C4s work. Once that's done, you can activate the time lock and take a zipline to a crane to pull out a giant piggy bank that your contact is filled with parts for a special massive drill called the Beast. You carry it over to the skylight and drop that fucker down. Once the time lock is done, you grab the parts one by one and rebuild the drill in front of the vault door and wait for it to do its thing. Every now and then you have to return to the main room to get drill bits to repair it. Once that's done, you take whatever you can, give Bane a call, and a fucking bus just crashes through a wall, allowing you to meet your getaway car and drive off with your stuff. I just love how much the flow of the missions is so different for this specific heist, instead of it just being the same heist but with no enemies. Now some heists are absolutely just that, but it's that extra level of care that went into making so many heists have a stealth option that I personally love. Even if I never touch stealth, because as much as I'd love to do it more, it's just brutal. The worst part is, a fully spec'd out stealth build is really shit once you go loud, and if you're like me who stealths on the highest difficulty for rewards, since in stealth everyone almost dies in one shot, you pretty much have to reset if you get found out. So while the levels are important and rightfully got an insane amount of attention from the devs and their environments, objectives, and little details, this game does a lot more right. Even if you removed all that, this is still an excellent first-person shooter. The first-person animations are all really good, the guns look and feel great, and there's a ton of variety in how you can build your character, and the enemies are fairly fun to fight too. I just love the attention to detail in some guns. I don't think I've seen a minigun or LMG in an FPS also portray the bullet links being ejected out of the gun as well. It feels so nice to use a minigun and just watch this hail of spent casings and clips just get blasted out the side like you're mowing a lawn made entirely of brass and plastic. Melee builds also work fairly well, even if they did have to jury-rig them with some really beefed out stats to make them not crumble. It's a shame that 99% of melee weapons are garbage though, which is strange because so many melees come with unique animations and details, yet almost every single one is basically the same stats, and all of them are bad except for 3, which are practically interchangeable. Admittedly, the enemies are one thing that's a little lacking compared to the strength of the levels in Gunplay. The reason being, most enemies kind of exist in their own extremes, and they're either a huge problem or not at all. The only ones that I don't really have this problem with is the Medic, Taser, and Cloaker. In general, they're pretty fair enemies that are just countered by awareness and being able to target them. Tasers will disable you and force you to erratically shoot, but if you can connect one hit, which is fairly easy since they automatically reload your weapon when tased, you can free yourself. Cloakers can be taken out quick and are easy to headshot, but if you don't see them in time, it's an instant down. It's just simple and easy to follow. Other than that, every enemy has something that you will absolutely notice if you're not countering it. The upgraded version of the standard SWAT, known as the TAN, since expecting someone to say a maximum force responder on the second most common enemy is silly, is completely bulletproof to the chest and will take 0 damage. But if you have a full auto weapon, melee, explosive, or shotgun due to some fun jAnK I can't wait to talk about, or snipers, then you pretty much can ignore them easily. The shield is like an upgraded TAN, but less stuff penetrate them. For them, you can only use fire, explosive snipers, or special weapons with armor-piercing ammo. Other weapons can deal with them if you have a special perk, but if you have none of these, they are impenetrable walls that will deliver a world of pain because they also do a scary amount of damage. But if you do have them, they just turn into a normal SWAT that you can't see past easily. The bulldozer is also kind of like the shield, but it's mostly just a bullet sponge. Not only are they a bullet sponge, but they also have some of the highest burst damage capable of killing a player in 2 to 3 shots. But at the same time, the DPS on the player's side is so high that the strat for these guys is to just run at them, mag dump their face, and kill them in 2 seconds. Snipers are also really annoying because they do insane damage, are the only enemy that can bypass your armor gate, and tend to be so far away that the majority of weapons can't reach them. As aiming doesn't provide perfect accuracy, just improved accuracy. If you don't have a super accurate weapon, you're kinda just fucked. At the very least, you will know when you should bring those, since they are a scripted spawn, so most missions won't even have them. These issues are made worse depending on the heist. There are some heists with next to no cover at all, so these issues are very apparent since enemies can't exactly be dodged by making yourself hard to hit. So when you have to run across an open field with a dozer, some shields, and a sniper, you will not have fun at all because of all the nigh unavoidable burst damage that's coming your way. Thankfully, even if some enemies remove a lot of the potential choices you have for your build, there's still a lot of options. This is probably one of the strongest FPS I've played in terms of variety. You have every weapon class you could possibly want. Dual SMGs, rocket launchers, light machine guns, bows, melee. This game has so much to choose from with the weapons alone, and you can take your weapons even further with various modifications. I will officially say this game actually has too much customization on these weapons, simply because you can make the single most cursed weapons I've ever seen in a video game. Want a minigun with small dick energy? Say no more, fam. Ever thought you wanted the true recoil experience of firing a 50 caliber anti-material rifle? I got you, my dog. Do you want to actually turn an AA-12 into a sniper rifle? It's mildly shit, but god damn it if I won't try to pull it off anyways. The things you could do to these guns would make the Second Amendment itself question whether we truly should have the right to bear arms. Then you have your skill tree, which admittedly isn't as interesting since you just pick whatever skills work with your weapon or deployable item, but they do enable some really fun things. Snipers go from a single target pick weapon that can maybe hit multiple enemies if they're in a straight line, to fucking railguns that absolutely shred hallways and will rack up your cleaner's costs like there's no tomorrow. You could run around at insanely high speeds when someone breaks your armor and yell at your teammates to revive them from a distance. Or you could just embrace your inner two-fort engineer and sit in a hall lined with your sentry guns. But the real game changers here are the perk decks. These become the backbone of whatever playstyle you want to accomplish because of how strong the mechanics are. Some of these are just stat boosts that push your character into a specific stat specialization, like becoming an 800-pound gorilla with stacked HP and regen, or having insane armor regen and extended armor gating. But most offer entirely new mechanics that form the core of that playstyle, sometimes involving you replacing your throwable item with some kind of buff. One perk deck allows any kills you or your party gets while you have full armor to build up HP, and once you trigger any form of armor regen after your armor breaks, all of that stored healing gets sent back to you. Another makes you take 75% reduced damage, but deals the rest as damage over time over 14 seconds. You get a flask, however, which removes all stored damage on use and can even heal some of that damage. So you end up being a beast who can tank so much damage, but you have to look out for a proper time to use it since the cooldown on the flask is 30 seconds and it's only reduced by 1 per kill. So you really have so many options to pick from, it's kind of incredible. Of course, I should mention this is from the perspective of someone who largely plays the middling difficulty, which is Mayhem, because your difficulty level can have a huge impact on what you can really bring. Normal up to overkill, it's just a bit too easy for me. Mayhem is a sweet spot where enemies deal just enough damage to be tough but not oppressive. Anything past Mayhem and the enemy's HP and damage goes up so much that you pretty much have to run meta stuff to not want to pull your hair out. This is partly because enemies just do more damage and their headshot multipliers are reduced. But even worse, they remove damage fall off from enemies, so enemies can kill a player in 3 to 4 shots from nearly any distance. I've played my fair share of Death Sentence 1 down solo, and let me tell you, I will not do that again. I even played 5 hours of Big Bank Stealth for that one heist example, and I refuse to touch Death Sentence 1 down because it just was not fun to me. Variety for me is paramount in the game, and Death Sentence is kind of where variety went to die. But Mayhem, you can get away with enough stuff, even if there's still a lot of weapons that suffer. That's one big issue with this game. There's so many weapons and most of them are just forgotten by this point. Out of the 30-something assault rifles in this game, I can't say I care about any of them outside of it being a gun I like in real life and think it looks cool. They all kind of feel the same to some extent, with the exception being some do decent damage while others struggle. This goes for roughly every other category as well. It wouldn't be that much of an issue if that's just what the game came with, but almost all of this is DLC weapons. It's just so weird to have a new DLC come out, and there's a pump-action shotgun that is very similar in performance and near identical in feel to another shotgun. Which is why I'm going to be a hypocrite and say that I bought it anyways, because it looks like the Ithaca trench gun, and I love it. That and the DLC pack came with a lever-action weapon that didn't have an obstructive cycle animation when you shoot it. As much as I will praise the animations, sometimes this game is genuinely too animated. Even when you aim down sights, some guns have recoil animations instead of just keeping the gun still, which throws you off after each shot. Just look at this weapon. When you shoot it while aiming, it blocks your sight, and when you hip fire, it covers the most important section of your screen. Does it look cool? Hell yeah. Is it annoying? You fucking bet. But really the biggest problem with the weapon balance is something called ammo pickup rate. Ammo pickups are not just the generic percentage of your total ammo. Every last weapon has its own individually set range of ammo you get per drop, and some weapons have disproportionately bad or good rates. Some guns straight up do not justify having such a poor ammo pickup. Take this shotgun for example. It's my favorite because it's a baller lever action shotgun with a sick reload. Its problem? You only have 18 shots, and it picks up, and I am not joking here, anywhere between 0.28 to 1 ammo. This means you will get 1 ammo back anywhere between every 1 to 4 ammo pickups. You could bring an ammo bag, but those are depleted based off a percentage of ammo restored. This gun can deplete an ammo bag so fast if you really want to use it. And for what? Yeah, it's a strong damage per hit, solid rate of fire, and has a good magazine capacity, but you know what else is good? This auto shotgun that holds 70 rounds with a magazine of 22 using the shotgun skill tree absolutely shreds crowds and is also capable of 1 to 3 shotting most enemies you'll use shotguns for, and its ammo pickup is 4.73 to 7.09. That is such an insane difference. So many guns that would be okay statistically just get fucked by the scarcity of ammo because not only do they use more ammo, they also pick up less than their better counterparts. And another problem with this game is how they sell it. Pretty much everything added these days is DLC, so while the base game still has a fair amount of weapons and heists, the vast majority of it is locked behind DLC, and some weapon classes are just gimped without DLC. Thankfully, you can play heists if you don't own them if someone else is hosting it, but other than that, you gotta own the DLC for any guns or perk decks. This is why I would suggest only buying the base game if you just want a trial. Essentially, if you really want to get serious with this game, buy the Legacy Collection bundle. It goes on bigger sales more often, so at worst it ends up being only $10 more than the base game, but it also ends up including 90% of the DLC, from heists to perk decks to weapons. And the last major problem I have is that the UI is kind of barren. There's a lot of stuff that goes on under the hood, so it'd just be nice to know the status of a lot more things, like if a buff is active or not, or how strong it is, or the cooldown of any perks that you have. Like, there's actually a stamina system in this game, so it'd kinda be nice to know how close I am to running out. None of that is represented in the UI. Thankfully, as you can probably see from this footage, this game has extremely nice mod support. It's almost too nice. You can more or less cheat your way through to your heart's content in random multiplayer matches depending on what mods you have installed. I think you can even use custom weapons in random multiplayer matches, which is kind of an insane thing to allow. Though I can't say if I've seen people rarely do it, if ever. At most, people will just use a HUD mod or some body pillow bag skins or things like that. My personal favorite mods are the crosshairs, since this game is really weird about accuracy, and the invisible armor mod because I love being tanky as hell, but having to stare at this padded vest all the time kinda sucks. Those recoil animations I was talking about earlier, that is fixed with a mod that has made my life so much better. Also, someone made a really good low wang mod, and I've pretty much been rocking it this entire video.
Where did you study? Kung Fu are us? Now your kind just became dangerous species.
Even if it crashes me like 20% of the time I enter CrimeNet. Sadly, not everything can be modded out. This game is special, to say the least. Here's a little history lesson. The engine Payday 2 runs on is a modified version of the Diesel engine, which is Overkill's proprietary game engine, which was initially made for some racing games before branching out. Needless to say, it's at least played a part in Payday being a weird programming monstrosity. It's largely attributed for the downfall of the console versions because of the way this game handles being updated, making it a monumental effort that ended up not being worth it. So, as you can probably guess, this game is buggy as hell sometimes. Or just including a lot of weird jank. To my understanding, due to limitations, they couldn't add a third-person animation for the minigun, so they made you hold it like an assault rifle. And you'll also see things like enemies jumping through walls, their AI will just break, if someone joins the entire game has to freeze and wait for them to load, which sucks if they have a potato tier computer. There's genuinely too many bugs in this game to really go over even a fraction of them that you'll see regularly, and unfortunately on the rare occasion they do get in the way of gameplay. I've seen endless smoke bombs that never go away, so the rest of the mission is a gray hell that I can't see in. Sometimes if the host lags, the enemies don't die when they're killed and their corpses are solid, while also ignoring the corpse limit, eventually trashing your FPS while blocking you. The only way to kill them is to melee them one by one because somehow that works and shooting them doesn't. The best part is they presumably jury-rigged this engine so much that the driving sections are complete and total dogshit as well. It's some of the worst driving I've seen in a game, which kinda sucks because they use the cars to pretty good effect in these heists. And you know what? Despite all this, these motherfuckers turned around and made Payday 2 into an incredible VR experience despite this, at least from what I've heard and seen from people I know. I once watched my friend run up to a solid wall that was too tall to see over in the pancake version, but he just stuck his minigun in the air over the wall and sprayed everyone down. And unfortunately that was a while ago when I wasn't recording a lot of my gameplay, because that single-handedly sold me on a $1,000 VR kit, as soon as I stopped being poor as fuck though. But enough of that. I want to end this on my favorite part. Sure, the variety and quality of heists and guns is really good. Sure, it's got a bitchin' soundtrack, but let me tell you about the jAnK. This game has so many, but why, decisions that make it a hilariously complicated game. You don't even have to learn 95% of it, but if you ever want to have nightmares, just look at this extremely comprehensive and in-depth Steam guide that's affectionately called The Long Guide. But I'll pick a few standout things that you genuinely do see. First, and this is the only one that you really need to know, and that's how shotguns work. In a normal game, shotguns are powerhouses by having high damage pellets deal large cumulative damage to enemies per shot. But Payday 2 is not a normal game. In Payday 2, enemies only get damaged by one pellet. One pellet deals full damage. So the way shotguns actually end up being most effectively used is standing at a slightly further range and lowering your accuracy to a sweet spot where you can just fire and hit multiple enemies at once. These are crowd controlling monsters, but they're not particularly great for single targets. Next is the threat meter. You may think that this has an effect on aggro, but it's actually something completely different. Threat is used to build suppression. Normally when an enemy is hit, you will apply the max suppression possible. But if you miss, then it uses your suppression stat to calculate the suppression buildup. This is actually stronger the further away you aim from an enemy. And there are two tiers of suppression. One just causes the enemy to miss more, fire less, and the next one causes them to stop whatever they're doing and try and find cover. This will essentially turn LMGs that cap out their threat pretty easily to act as a crowd control device by just filling the air with lead and scaring the shit out of everyone, which is just rad. The only problem is that this literally does not exist in 90% of the game. Once you reach Mayhem and maybe even Overkill, there are no enemies that can spawn except snipers that can be suppressed, which sucks because I love the idea of that mechanic. Another incredibly silly thing, and similar to that, is that enemies have suppression against you as well. This comes in the form of armor regen. Once your armor regen starts, it instantly sets you back to full. And this is great since you're not really out of the fight that long. You don't have to worry about a wayward bullet putting you at half armor and then you have to wait for it to recharge again. But they decided to add an extra layer to this, which is that missed shots that were made by enemies firing at you will add time back to your shield recharge. It doesn't completely reset it, it just adds a second or so back. This means that you can't just get lucky and recharge your shield mid-combat or take cover behind a tiny wall. You have to actively find deep cover for it to recharge. Man, I can't tell you how much I love how stupid and technically deep this cheesy as fuck bank robbing game is. Every last facet of it oozes stupid fun, and I will never not love this game. And you could bet your ass I am dying to play some Payday 3.